Hi everyone, welcome back to the Graft Concept Podcast. My guest today is the running G, or Gra Grindrod, a running sports coach and business coach, tutor for further education, and he also coaches a little bit of swimming as well. Gra helped me with my running when I was training for the High Rocks World Championships last year, in which time he taught me a lot about running technique, how to structure your training and sessions to get faster and run for longer. So I think there's going to be a lot of value for people to take from this episode. Graeme, great to have you on.
No, thank you. Appreciate the offer.
What inspired you to sort of become a running coach and obviously like coaching in the other aspects of things that you help people with?
And it's quite a funny one. I've always been into fitness. I've always played football to a decent standard. And then in a previous relationship, I kind of got into running and I realised I was okay at running and I enjoyed it. I think it was because you could see the potential and you could see the benefit of training and the application of following a programme. And then I joined a local club at the time because I used to live in Prestwich, with Salford Harriers, and the talent and the expertise in terms of the coaching there. I was always, obviously, I was teaching at the time, but it opened my eyes in terms of it's something that I fancied doing. So I love helping people, and I thought it was an opportunity to use my teaching head and my coaching head and apply that to the running side. And I think fast forward, 15, 16 years, I'm still doing it, and yeah, it's definitely a passion of mine. I love seeing people just running past as you're driving to work, running past as you are dropping the kids off. It's great to see that, obviously, post-COVID, people are still running and people are still out there, like, training. It's great, yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I always liked that. Like, always thinking when you're in the car passing someone running, like they're either battling through it or they're in like the best place ever, just like
Correct, yeah.
getting away from everything else that's going on in the day.
I'll be honest with you, Chris. And then there'll be sometimes when I'm carrying a niggle or an injury or an illness, and I'm fretting and thinking, why am I not out there? So there's also there's that competitive side as well. You're like, oh, I wonder what pace they're running. I wonder if they thought about maybe just like fixing the form a little bit, and they might not be carrying like an injury. So straight away, the teaching stroke coaching head comes on. But at the same time, I applaud anybody that's out there, whatever pace they're running, whatever, should we say, battle they've got going on themselves. The fact that they're out there training in the gym, running outside, I think it's a success. It's a win. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's good to see that it's sort of almost grown in popularity since like the end of COVID, hasn't it? Running, like there's all sorts of run clubs popping up everywhere. Like, what do you put that down to?
Definitely, I think during COVID, people had a lot of time to think about, probably similar to yourself as well, whereby they were probably looking at the habits that they had, the lifestyle habits, and thought, wait a minute, if I just went outside and maybe did a Strava challenge, or I ran a kilometre every day for 30 days, and then I just think it became a bit of a bug. And obviously we've got a lot of running influencers out there these days. When I say influencers, I mean people with exceptional ability that have become like content creators, which is I think great because I follow some of them and I get some ideas for my own training from them. But then I also think it's great for just the Joe Bloggs who's down the street who's just on the couch to 5k. So it kind of ticks every single box. The fact that there's that many people out there running and still running outside at this moment in time tells you that there is definitely, and it continues to be a surge. And obviously with your future podcast coming with the Manchester Run Club in and around Manchester, I definitely think it's not just going to stop. I think the boom will continue.
Yeah, definitely. I think like it's great because there's such a wide spectrum, isn't there? Like you described there, like there's like quite, other than getting a pair of trainers and some time, like there's no barrier to entry, is there? Like anybody can get up and make a start right the way through to sort of like elite level sport. And I think wherever you are on that spectrum, like there's somebody you can sort of look at or compare yourself to if that's what you want to do and sort of look to improve or just get out and get some fresh air. It's a really like great way to sort of spend time and get into fitness, I think, isn't it? If that's something that you're aiming to do or even like progress on other elements, it carries over so much, doesn't it, into you don't have to be a runner to get the benefit out of it.
I totally agree. You've hit the nail on the head. I often say to some of my students or people starting out in the fitness industry, get a pair of trainers, decent pair of trainers. Obviously, back in the day, it used to be £50, £60. If you're worried about the comfort side, you could be looking around about anything between 80 to 120. Pair of trainers, pair of shorts, maybe a top. it's minimal equipment really in comparison to something like swimming, triathlon, cycling, where you need obviously a larger scale of obviously say like a bike or the full triathlon equipment in order to be able to just kind of compete. But for a lot of people, if you just put, especially when you see people running on a Saturday or Sunday morning, they might not train as hard during the week, but they'll get out there on a Saturday or Sunday morning with like almost religiously, apologies, um, to hopefully get a bit of freedom space up here as well. I often use running as there was like a mantra where it says that outdoor is free. There's no cost whatsoever. You can put the pair of trainers on, go running around some of the beautiful sceneries we've got in Northern Bamford and over to Edenfield, and you can literally run with somebody else. You can run alone. You can run with music. I know majority of the time I try and run with no music whatsoever, so I can just gather my thoughts, have a little think of what's going on, and by the time I finish, but you never feel bad. You always feel great. Only if you have a little niggle or some sort of illness, you never regret a run. And that's one of the biggest take-homes that I got told from a coach years ago. You never regret a training session. It's there. You've banked it. It'll be in reserve, and you don't lose that training gain once you've got that consistency. And that's what I love about the podcast, and obviously listening to your own journey and seeing how far you've come. It is about just two terms I keep mentioning in my classes at the moment is application and effort. If you can do the two with the consistency, there's no reason why you can't be successful in what you're applying yourself to.
Just keep taking steps forward, isn't it? So, like, whilst the barrier to entry is like quite low, often people do feel a little bit sort of daunted or intimidated to sort of get started in running. So that's certainly sort of my experience. They're always worried about sort of maybe how far they can run or what speed they can go at. Obviously, with your running coaching, like, what sort of advice would you give to somebody who's perhaps sort of feeling like that?
Everyone starts somewhere. Doesn't matter how fast you're running. Doesn't matter how like slow you're moving. It's one foot in front of the other, quite simply. So a lot of people's kind of problems and come from the fact that they compare themselves naturally to somebody else who's been running for ages. Oh well, you can run a 5k in this. You can run a 10k in this. That's not what you need to be worrying about. You just need to worry about in terms of are you trying to make yourself better, putting on your trainers, going outside and running maybe just lamppost to lamppost, or maybe just running lamppost and then walking and then running again. If you're doing that, I think for some people they don't like to run outside, do they? Because they don't like the idea of people watching them and seeing them, which I can understand. So if that was the case, I think starting your running journey on a treadmill might be a good win and an easy win, because it might be a case of running for 2 to 3 minutes, walking for 2 minutes, running for another 2 to 3 minutes, walking for another 2 to 3 minutes, and you might repeat that for a good five blocks, and then all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, I can run. This is easier than I thought. And I think it's the starting part of the journey which a lot of people struggle with and continue to struggle with.
Yeah, I agree. It does take a little bit of time, doesn't it, just to sort of give yourself that evidence that you sort of been able to build and you're getting the benefit of it. And then all of a sudden, it just sort of clicks and you're like, oh, actually, I feel all right today. That one didn't feel quite as hard. And I'm looking forward to the next one. And yeah, you've just got to build from there, haven't you?
Correct, yeah. I think, like I said, I think a lot of people, they don't mean to, but society does it. We all compare ourselves. You and I both know you're on Strava. So when you're on Strava, you go for a run. It might be an easy run. And some people, and I'm part of a local Harriers club, they'll put on the leaderboard or a Strava segment. And the idea is they've gone out to do an easy run, but they've run harder than the easy run suggests. So that's not an easy run. So now they're running to compete against people rather than just running for the sake of running. I mean, one of my words of advice is I often do it once a year. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but I go off Strava for 3 to 4 months and I just run off a stopwatch. I don't go off GPS. I don't go off the science. I run for feel. So I run how I feel on that day. Yes, if I've got a training session, I'll run based upon what I think I'm hitting because I think I know the pace in which I probably am running at. But the idea behind all of that is to stop getting captured with the comparison and then just enjoy the training for what it is.
Yeah. No, I think there's a lot of value in that that people could take away. And yeah, Strava's a funny one, isn't it? It's such a good tool, but yeah, if you don't use it in the right way, then it can send you off in the wrong direction. So you said mentioned a couple of terms. Well, our term there, like easy run. There's a few sort of terms that get bandied around in sort of running that I just wanted to get like a really
Yeah.
simple explanation from you on, so that people that are either like maybe getting into running or looking at like plans, they might know what those terms mean. So like easy run, what's your interpretation of that? What should people be focusing on for an easy run?
Yeah, so easy run. Obviously, this is all dependent. If you've got a Garmin or you've got a Chorus and you've got a heart rate strap, your easy run should be in zone 2. So to clarify, zone 2, you don't want your heart rate going above 120. So if your heart rate's going above 120 to 140, you're naturally starting to work in between them stages, zone 2 and zone 3. So your zone 3 would be more like going to like a tempo-based threshold run. You don't want to be going anywhere near that. So zone 2, you want to be out there. So I'll use my own comparison. So if I'm doing an easy run, it'll be around about 5:30 to 5:45 minute Ks. So in terms of the minute Ks, making sure my minute mile is basically at least 2 to 3 minutes slower than what my race pace would be. So I would work that out with a client. We do a simple 2 mile time trial. That 2 mile time trial at the start of their journey, we would see what that time is, and then we would then calculate what their easy run could be, what their tempo run could be, and then what we think their 5K and 10K time could be. So for me, an easy run should be one where you can have a conversation. So imagine me and you go for a run. We're going to go for an easy 1 hour run. We should be able to hold a conversation whilst we're running. We've both got that training, should we say, that training time in the bank already, so that should be fairly easy. So I know, based upon your Strava and mine, I think we could run between 5:20 to 5:50 relatively easy. And then we could go out for an hour, I know we could, and have a full conversation like we are now. That could be an idea for the future, a podcast while running. But yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, that's my interpretation of an easy one, and probably a lot of the science, because obviously I do teach this to future personal trainers at college and sixth form, and this is something that a lot of people struggle with. What is an easy training session? What is an easy run? And far too often they go too hard in the easy run, so they don't recover. So when it comes to the tempo run the day later or the 2 days later, they wonder why they're not hitting the times or the actual target pace.
yeah. That is something that I find it difficult just to go. It sounds like big headed, but like slow enough. It almost feels harder to run slower than fast.
Do you know what? A lot of people say that, myself included, but you have to, like Thursdays, if I normally drop the little man off, he's in reception over in Norden. So once I've dropped him off, I go for my long run on a Thursday morning, and I try to keep it between 5:15 to 5:45. If I go faster than 5:15 minute K, then I know I'm doing something wrong. I need to slow down.
Yeah,
Does that make sense? Yeah.
yeah, of course it does. Yeah, I think yeah, it's just something you've got to get used to, isn't it? If you want to make improvements. So next term, you touched on it there, tempo
Yeah.
running. What's
So a tempo session, I would usually do my tempo session. Structurally, a lot of running clubs do theirs on a Thursday. So they would normally do a Tuesday session, which would be a speed work, and then your tempo on a Thursday. I think that's something that's been set in stone for a good 40 years. That doesn't mean that you can follow that pattern, because your working lifestyle, your running lifestyle can mirror your own, should we say. So for me, tempo usually kind of comes about Thursday or Friday. Usually on a Friday, because I've done my easy run on a Thursday. So that Friday tempo run will be 10-15 minutes warming up at an easy pace. Towards the last 5 minutes of that pace, I will start to increase. So you're probably talking around about 4 30-minute Ks, 4 20-minute Ks. And then eventually, I might do a typical tempo session. It might be 15 minutes running at 4:15-minute K or 4:10-minute K. So literally around about I'm doing it off the top of my head, around about 6:25, 6:30-minute mile, and holding that for that 15 minutes. So the idea of that tempo is that it's supposed to feel comfortably hard. You can hold it, you know you're working, you know your heart rate's getting to around about 140, 150, but you're not burning too many carbs. Does that make sense? And there's different examples of a tempo session. So you could do literally 15-minute warm up and then do 2 blocks of 10-minute tempos with a 5-minute window where you're just doing a rolling run. at a real easy jogging pace, and then you go back and do your next set of 10. The idea behind a tempo is usually for people who are training for maybe a faster 10K, fast half marathon, or maybe just attempting the first marathon, because it allows the body to get used to running harder than what you normally would do through the week.
Yeah. So that, yeah, in summary, they're like a shorter bursts of faster effort,
Yeah.
essentially. And then, like, what about intervals then?
Yeah. So kind of the speed work, obviously there's loads of examples of speed work. A lot of people tend, from running backgrounds, or you know your top runners that I tend to follow on Instagram or Strava, they tend to do something on a Tuesday or a Saturday. But again, it's all about availability. An interval typical session. One of the first ones that I think I ever did at Salford Harriers, it was awful. I used to live next to Heaton Park, and I don't know if you've done the Heaton Park run. You know where you run up what's known as Angina Hill. For anybody who lives around that area, it's awful. It goes on, it feels like it goes on forever. And I remember we were doing 14 times 1 minute hill sprints up Angina Hill with 1 minute recovery. So you have to get down the hill as quick as possible. And I can't explain the feeling after I'd done that session. That was one of my first ever sessions with Salford Harriers, and I hated it. I really hated it. I hated it because it was hard. After 6 weeks of doing that type of training, I loved it. I could see that I was getting better. So that's just typically one idea of like an interval-based session. But favourites of mine, and I know I've given this to you before, is 5 times 4 minutes or 4 times 5 minutes, trying to get under a certain pace. So obviously looking at your 5K time, we were looking at 3:45s, weren't we? 3:45-minute Ks, 3:40-minute Ks for that block, and then giving you a 3-minute rolling recovery after you've completed one block. The idea behind that is what we're doing is we're working on that top end speed. So when it comes to a race day, you can literally run harder or as hard as you can and hold that pace. So the idea is within the speed work, the tempo work, and the easy runs, you want to fluctuate your running pace throughout the week, so then you're not staying stale. If you just run at one pace every single week, how are you going to improve? You're not putting yourself in that uncomfortable zone, and that's kind of one of the key principles that I take away and try and work with, whether it's an online client, whether it's a face-to-face client, or whether it's like a running group as well.
Yeah. And like what sort of, I mean, everyone's gonna have different amount of time that they can put into the training, aren't they? But if somebody's sort of set on getting better at running and they decide they want to either have a coach or go to a plan, like roughly what split, like percentage wise, would fall into like easy running, threshold or tempo, and then interval sessions?
So personally, let's imagine you've got a runner and they can account for 5 runs a week. So I would say straight away, 2 of them runs would be, one would be a really easy run during the week, maybe a 45-minute run. The other easy run would be the long run, but towards the weekend. But it'd be depending on the A goal or the B goal or the C goal. If, let's say, this person, he or she, is running for 5 times a week and their goal is, their A goal is a half marathon, the long run might have within that broken down little segments. So it might be that they start easy running for 15 minutes and then they do 20 minutes running at marathon pace, half marathon pace, and then they go back to the easy running. So the idea of that longer run, they're banking the miles, but they're getting used to running the pace for the race, which is occurring maybe in 10 to 12 weeks. I would then say definitely one speed session a week. So when I say one speed session, you might only cover between 3 and 4K. You might go to a running track. I know you've done it over at Rosendale, Mouse Pit, where you can hire it. You pay perfect. You pay £5 for the year, and you just book it out.
Crazy, that, isn't it?
I find that mad. That is one of the cheapest places that you can go and do that outdoor facility. Don't get me wrong, though.
I've paid more for a coffee in Manchester than that for
Yeah.
3 years running at track.
It's mad. If you go and get a beer, an IPA beer, £6, like in a whole tab, it's madness. So I paid that forward. You put it up there on your socials. I put it up on my socials. I tell my friends about it, whereby just go do it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I kind of wish I could get down to some of the Harriers. So I'm part of Rochdale Harriers on a Tuesday night. But at the moment, time permits, and obviously I've got a young family, so I try and get as much training done in and around college or basically my working day. And then at weekends, I try to have Saturday completely off and then a Sunday out and about. But In terms of going back to the first question, I think 5 runs a week, 2 easy runs, one with a long run, one speed work, definitely a tempo. And then the other training session could be like a mix, like a kind of up, like a mix match or like a match up, where you might go out for a run, you might be at 40 minutes, so you might have 10 minutes warming up, you might go out and do 10 minutes tempo, you might then throw in 6 times like 50 meters strides, and then finish off with an easy bit. The idea of that is you just tap it into every single zone. You don't necessarily need to do that, but again, that's an idea that some top runners and some like ex-club runners tend to do, just as a way of fresh. I want to say keeping the training fresh.
Yeah, keeps it interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think so. You mentioned at the start, like when people pick up niggles, don't they, inevitably when they're running? What can people do to avoid the risk of that? Like you mentioned, like obviously like warming up for a block at the start of each session. Is there anything else you'd recommend?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I've got a set of resistance bands which go everywhere with me at work. It might be whereby I get into work if I've had a run or I've literally drove in. I spend 10, 15 minutes just sat down in the gym on the mats and I just do all the stretches. I'm quite fortunate that I go to local physio, so over at Easy Street in Northern and Middleton, and one of the best physios around in terms of Brogan. And whenever I have a niggle, I tend to go to her. But the way I look at it and the way she looks at it is, a niggle is your body's way of telling you that you've got a weakness that you need to work on. That's all it is. Yeah. So at the moment, I'll give you my old. So at the moment, I've got a bit of a tight calf, which is sore, but it's coming from my lower left back, which is tight. But because I'm carrying my little baby on the right side, so I'm overcompensating. So I know where it's coming from. So at the moment, I'm trying to do as much as possible to try and eliminate any future injury. So I've backed off a bit of the running this week, and I've just kind of got the foam roller out and the resistance bands out to try and do the strength work. I'm still training, but I'm not doing the stuff that the bread and butter, which is my running, which I love, because I've obviously got a tightness. And then I think the next thing I might do tonight or tomorrow is I might have a hot bath with magnesium bath salts. And then once I've got out the bath, I've got some like CPD oil, which is like a massage bath. So I try and self massage as well if I can't get into to see Brogan. But yeah, that's kind of what I would always say to people who've got niggles. At the moment, I don't know if you can tell them a little bit of a cold. So if it goes on the chest, don't train. If it goes on the chest and you start coughing, it's not worth it. Don't put yourself back 2 to 3 weeks. Just listen to your body, recover, get your vitamins on board, food first approach. So get as much fruit, get as much veg on board. In the winter months, at the moment, I've started taking supplements, which is, I think, the Pure Sport vitamin D and omega 3. So I've started taking one a day. That has definitely helped. I feel a bit more alert. Trying to think of anything else. I think that's kind of the way I approach it and what I suggest for a lot of clients. If you're struggling with niggles and you're the type of person that goes running but doesn't stretch before running, why aren't you? Because I promise you, you might not get an injury within the first 6 weeks or 8 weeks. You might be very lucky. You might get a niggle that becomes a persistent injury that then becomes proper injury, where you then have to go and see somebody.
Yeah. Yeah, touching on supplements, we're at risk here of going off on a massive tangent, I think. But
Of course, yeah.
you told me about beetroot and the benefits of that. Didn't you do like a dissertation on some beetroot and how it affects performance?
It was, yeah. So I was fortunate that one of my studies was about the effects of beetroot and nitrate, and how nitrate is obviously one of your superfoods for the what I would call the endurance athlete. So I did my test on triathletes, swimmers, and runners. And if I've got, so I'll give you an example. My A race next year is Manchester Marathon in April 27th. So a month before, I will start taking daily, so literally twice daily, beetroot to try and make sure that I'm getting as much recovery process into the muscles, into the bloodstream, so helping and aiding the recovery. So nitrate is one of the best things for obviously the lungs and for the obviously the oxidation within the muscles in terms of the capillaries and the transporters. As we say, everything that's great in terms of the body and moving it forward. So yeah, I'm a massive advocate. I'm hoping you've carry that on, or you're still doing that, or you touched upon it every now
Since
and
you've
again.
told me, yeah.
Yeah.
Anytime I have like a race, whether it's a high rocks or the marathon, I've I use like the shots, in the week leading up to it. Sounds like it's maybe not quite as long as I should, but yeah, the beat it shots. I've for the 7 days before, I've one and then two on the race day. It's
Do you
like
feel
what they
any
suggest.
benefit? Do you feel any benefit, or do you think it's
I
placebo?
mean, it's difficult because I can't really remember what I felt like. I guess I never really did anything before I started having it, but it always makes you feel as I think it helps with my mindset in the week leading up to it. Like I'm sort of telling myself that I'm doing the right things.
I
So
promise
even
you,
if
a lot of athletes noted that during. So obviously we had some people taking it, and we had some people not taking it, and the people not taking it wasn't aware that they were. So you've also got that psychological issue whereby it almost goes down to like your training routine. If you don't do a certain thing, do you feel tripped up because you've missed that certain amount of training? But my only suggestion to that is I would literally not take it for 2 months. See how you're feeling in them 2 months, but in your diary, because I know obviously you keep a diary, just making a note of things. Do you feel sluggish? Do you feel like you could have pushed a bit more in that training session? Do you feel like you left everything out there? And then try the beat route for 2 months or 1 month, but noting how you feel after each session. And then at the end of the month, I challenge you to see if you actually, obviously, if we could get you in the lab, that'd be brilliant. But and then look at the science behind it, and look at obviously your blood production as well, and like your lactate. But obviously that'd be another discussion right there.
yeah. Yeah. So anyone who's not aware of what we're talking about, like you can get these little beetroot shots which you have like daily. You can get them anywhere. Most supermarkets they have them in some form or another, or like Amazon always has them. But yeah, it's worth looking into. Something else I wanted to speak about this time of year, sort of particularly in the UK, sort of cold, wet, short days. People who've got like gym memberships or access to treadmills are probably going to be looking at doing a lot of running on them as opposed to outside. Is there anything that you would recommend people consider if they're going to be sort of doing a decent load of running on treadmills as opposed to out in the outside?
Yeah, again, I'm a massive advocate for treadmill running. We're fortunate at college; we have some of the best treadmills available in our sports science lab, very similar to what you get like in your top universities. So selfishly, I use them for training purposes. I would say if you're thinking of doing treadmill running and thinking of keeping obviously a certain type of base over the winter months, so the next 4 months, I would only be doing 2 treadmill runs a week, just because of the way that the pounding is on the actual treadmill. So I always put mine at 0.5% or 1% to mirror what it feels like running outside. So if you do a
Yeah,
treadmill session, yeah, go on.
I was going to ask you, like, somebody once told me to do that, and I don't really never knew what the science behind it was, but I always stick it on 0.5, and it's that.
Yeah,
What's the reason?
that's good. That's good. I mean, I always have mine on one because the idea is when you run outside, it's never just a straight road. So when you're running on a treadmill, it's never just like that. So if you just slightly put it up, you are trying to mirror and capture what it's like to run outside. It's probably better in terms of your running style as well, because naturally you don't want to be running like that, do you? If you've got it like that as such, you've also got a bit of, I think, for psychology purposes as well. The science behind it is, it most definitely it mirrors what you're doing outside. So that's what I try to take from that. But in terms of the psychology aspect, I think the longest I've done on a treadmill, believe it or not, is I did a marathon on a treadmill, and that was a long, yeah. But I did that for charity when I think it was Pure Gym in Sandbrook Park. Used to be Fitness First. One of the PTs was doing 7 marathons in 7 days on a treadmill. So I said I'd join him, and I think I ran 3:43. I was quite impressed with my time on the
Yeah, that's
treadmill.
good.
However, it was one of the hardest things ever, and I say this because anyone who runs on a treadmill for up to an hour, which I don't mind doing, because you can get a real good session in. You control the pace. You can dictate and push the pace. You've got the option of putting and literally it's the same as doing a turbo session on a bike, whereby you can dictate what nutrition you're putting on. So as I've mentioned before, I've got Manchester Marathon in April, but I'm running that marathon as a half. So I'm running. My friend, one of my close friends, is running half, and I'm running half. The intention is to try and come in the top three and try and win the purse. That's what we're going for. So there's a massive, again, I'm going to mention this later on, but there's a massive incentive. One of our close friends passed away a couple of years ago, so we've done a lot of raising money for something that's quite close to heart for the association association, and we agreed, we looked at the winning time last year in a pairs, I think it was 2:40, 46 or 48, I can't remember off the top of my head. So the idea is he runs for Oldham and is a very good runner and a triathlete and a former Ironman, and I am of a good fitness. So the idea is we're going to try and do this for our friends and obviously raise money in the same time. So I will spend a lot of time in treadmills trying to get the nutrition right. Although I'm only going to be doing 13.1 miles, I want to do it. I want to do the best that I can do. I'm not talking PB shape. I'm talking as fast as what I can, given obviously where I'm at in terms of my own personal running at the moment.
Yeah, that sounds like a great goal with obviously some like added incentive as well. I'm
Yeah,
sure you'll do really well with that. It'd be good to see how it goes. So like we've spoken loads about running, and obviously I know we've not got endless amounts of time, but with your the stuff you're teaching with like further education and on the sports and business sides of things, what changes have you noticed in like the fitness industry over the last few years?
Oh, it's quite funny you say that because we've been looking at the future of the fitness industry in the like next 5 to 10 years. So some of my future PTs are 6 months into a course whereby in 6 months' time they'll be some of them are working in the industry already at next level, where I think you've gone training there before at the bottom Bury Road. One of the other ones has just had an interview at Body Pro over in Bury Road. And then one of the other students has essentially got an interview at David Lloyd. Obviously, over the last 10 years, there's that many of my students who are working in the industry. It's always nice to get them in and talk about what they like and what they've seen. And one of the biggest ones we spoke about, and we had Rob Nugent who came and joined us a couple of weeks ago for a bit of a chat, and we spoke about the evolution of CrossFit to High Rocks. And we spoke about High Rocks and how a lot of gyms now are starting to A, get the accreditation, and B, starting to kind of mirror what they're doing. Not everybody's getting the accreditation, but we see that how fitness and with the running aspect is going. And obviously I followed your journey and I followed other people's. It's something that intrigues me and some of our friends, because I think if you can be a good runner and good like overall fitness, you can be pretty decent at High Rocks, which obviously you're probably seeing as well. So I think that's one of the big ones at the moment. I think a lot of even just the normal novice, new to exercise and fitness, I think the key is they're trying it as well, which I think is great. So more people are putting themselves out there to try things that are new post-COVID. And I think that's kind of a wonderful thing that needs to be applauded, because more people are putting themselves out of their own little comfort zones to try and compete. And it's very, very hard to compete because naturally you're comparing yourself to yourself and to other people. So I think that's one of the first things that we've looked at. And obviously the drive of online platforms like this and social media. I think if you use it in the right manner and the right way, it can be such a great tool for businesses and for people's mindset and people's health. But again, using it in the right manner.
Yeah, I think the community seems to be a big part of it, doesn't it?
That's
Or there's big running groups sort of popping up everywhere, and then like High Rocks is something that you can go and do as part of a gym, and I think it probably encourages people, like we said with the running, like it breaks down that like barrier to entry, doesn't it? If you're doing it with other people and you're not just looking at it as fitness, it's a bit more of a holistic sort of thing you're doing with your time. Definitely. So as a coach and a mentor, then like, have you got any sort of favourite books or podcasts or people like you look up to that have influenced how you coach people?
Yeah, it's quite interesting you say that. I mean, most recently I've started following, you probably know him, that Jake Dearden,
Yeah,
who's a High Rocks athlete. I like his kind of goals that he's and pathway that he's been going on. And there's another guy called Chris Williamson, which I don't mind them, but in terms of like running, one of the most quirkiest ones that I follow is Benny's Running. I don't know if you've come across him on Instagram.
I think I have. Yeah, the
Yeah,
name stands out.
yeah, I like what he stands for. He's a fast runner. We're talking 2:24, 25 marathon runner. But for for someone like myself, I'm proper into my trainers, running trainers, and the evolution of running trainers as well. We could literally be on it for hours. I know we could. The beauty is, and then James is running as well. I like these people because they're just ordinary folk who literally analyze it. So whenever I want to buy a pair of trainers, I'll go onto one of the YouTube channels, have a look at what they're saying about the train, do my own comparison, probably spend another further week doing my own research, and then think great information, and then take it from there. Yeah, there's quite a few at the moment. But in terms of books, the 5 a.m. Club, one of my favourites, most definitely. If I'm being honest, the one book, it wasn't a book as such, it was an audio book that kind of motivated me, and I've listened to 3 times. Was Matthew McConaughey, Green Lights. What?
Yeah, I love that.
That I
He's
love
so
him as
good,
an
isn't he?
actor. He's a great actor, but he got me because he's got such a soothing voice, and I think I've listened to that 3 times, and I love the concept. In life, you have moments where you have exposure and you have opportunities, and is it a green light moment? And I just love the concept of it, and I think, that's probably one of my personal favourites. I don't know if you
Yeah,
got that. Green light.
I think, yeah, no, love it. Yeah, I think, like you say, his voice is. I could listen to him talk for hours. Every now and again, you get like a motivational video on Instagram pop up, don't you? And just end up listening to his voice.
I'll be honest, he's great. And you know what? A great athlete as well. Great
Yeah,
athlete. Looks after himself, trains hard. Another one as well, I don't know if you follow Mark Wahlberg, but gets up at 4 o'clock in the morning, trains at
I've seen his
motorcycle
daily
bike.
routine.
I mean, don't get me wrong, that's mad. But he lives
Yeah,
in a hotter climate, so it's probably a bit easier.
yeah,
Yeah. Are we
cool.
all good?
So, yeah, a couple of quick ones just to wrap up. So, what's your favourite running session?
Yeah, tempo session. Absolutely love 2 bites by 15 minutes. So literally 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes warming up. Block of 15, 5 minutes easy running, block of 15. It's one of the best ones that I use for half marathon and marathons. It's basically the bread and butter whereby you can see where you're at. So yeah, probably one of my faves.
Yeah, so quick, like 2 blocks 15.
Yeah, that's probably my favourite. I don't know if you've ever done that one.
Yeah, I've done it a couple of times thinking when you program some stuff for me. So yeah, I do enjoy that.
Yeah.
What's one piece of running gear you can't live without? Yeah, you said you like the trainers. All right, and then finally, if you could
Running
go on
trainers.
I probably rely on my Garmin a bit too much. Yeah, I'm probably a bit too into the data and rely on the Garmin a bit too much. Last one then.
Yeah.
If you could run anywhere in the world, where would it be?
Oh. There's two runs I really want to do. I really want to do New York Marathon. I've heard really good things about New York Marathon. So that's a bucket list. In terms of running, I'd love to run. I don't know, this is going to be a mad one, by the way. The Great Wall of China, somewhere around there. Yeah, I don't know why. I've always it's something that stood out, and I've always thought I'd love to run there.
Yeah, I can imagine it'd be good. Brilliant. Well, I think we're probably out of time there, mate, but really appreciate you jumping on, taking the time to go through. I think there's a lot of value for people to take out of this if they're looking at getting into running. Where can people find out a bit more about your coaching and sort of the group run sessions that you do?
Yeah, so at the moment, I've kind of, my group runners, they're kind of doing their own thing on a Friday morning. Majority of them that turn up. That's just purely because of timings and obviously lifestyle. And, we've got a 6-month-old baby, so I'm just trying to adapt and get used to that. But in terms of, obviously, I'm still active on social media. I'm still writing programs. I'm still helping people face to face. So you can find me on Instagram on the Running G. And obviously, hopefully, we might get another conversation like this with yourself and maybe Rob alongside the running side or maybe the fitness side. So, yeah, hopefully. It's been a pleasure and I appreciate the coming on today as well.
Yeah, no, thanks for taking the time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Great. Well, yeah, we'll leave it there then. Thanks everyone for listening. As I mentioned, loads of value to take away there. As always, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen. It really does help the show grow. Graeme, Running G. I know you're a man of many names, but appreciate your time. Look forward to catching up again soon. Cheers, mate. Bye.